What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with NIO, Tesla, SPY, and the overall market. I'm going to break down why the market saw a big sell-off and why there could be a bounce coming tomorrow, looking at some new technicals. But just note that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit this $2,000, you're guaranteed 30 in total. And the offer ends at the end of March. Anyways, looking at the markets, NIO saw a slight red day, very, very flat, trying to hold its 20 EMA. I mentioned to everyone we're going to be looking for this push to be approaching, and then watch and see if this could hold at these levels, if it could try to get back above 4.5 or not. Came a little short of that today by about 10 cents, only to come back down. So NIO is still very flat. Once again, we're waiting for some other catalysts. Now, one could argue that there's a possible cup and handle that's forming, but in order for this to pan out, we need to see the handle develop. We need to see NIO hold its supports and get that bounce. As of right now, it's looking a little bit lackluster, so we'll see if this ends up panning out or not. I'm going to break down some factors involving NIO in the markets, and I'll break down these charts in more detail. Just know that for today, there wasn't any significant news that came out. I'm still seeing these headlines being repeated about how NIO has lots of upside potential for 2026 and 2027. And these low share prices that we're seeing on NIO could be very, very good buying opportunities. Now, there was also news that came out that on January 27th, NIO opened its 3100th power swap station in China. That's great news as they're continuing to expand as time goes on. However, just know that for the short term, the share price is in a sideways channel. The overall sales to price ratio is still very low for NIO compared to its others out there. And as time goes on, I'm sorry, the price to sales ratio, I think I said sales to price to sales ratio. Sorry about that, guys. That's what's a little bit down, but it's okay because NIO still is showing signs that's very undervalued, and that's another good buying opportunity. Goldman Sachs is giving them a sell rating. Nothing's really changing here. The price ratio is still very flat. But we do tend to be green about 55% of the time on Tuesdays, and we tend to see more volatility during the second to last hour of the day. Now, besides that, I'm not seeing anything else that's too significant, so just keep that in mind. So what do I see for the heat map right over here? Well, Google, Microsoft, Nvidia, these things are in the red. We saw a big sell-off for tech. But then when it comes to the finance sector, we saw a lot of green out there. We saw a lot of stocks in the green looking at like Berkshire Hathaway and health technology. But because tech sold off, we got a lot of downside for the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ. Looking at other factors, going into tomorrow, we just have the Richmond Fed announcing data at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Besides that, there's nothing else that's too crazy. So why did the market sell off the way it did? Basically, there's a startup company known as DeepSeek that's come out, and they've developed an AI known as the R1 that's very similar to ChatGPT. It has very, very great functionalities, but here's the thing you have to remember about that. They claim that they built this for under $6 million USD. Obviously, these numbers have not been verified, but that adds to a lot of like questions about the dominance that the US has over AI, and that's led to a lot of questions. That's why we saw a lot of AI stocks sell off, especially Nvidia. However, when you do a deep dive into this, you could argue that the move the market made was very exaggerated because looking at this right over here, it's not necessarily that they're surpassing the US in terms of AI, but the correct reading of this would be that open source models are surpassing proprietary ones, and DeepSeek has profited from the open research and open sources. So you have like Llama from Meta and factors like that. They did come up with new ideas and built upon other people's work. Because the work is published in open source, everyone can profit from it. That's like the main thing that could be said about this. So it is impressive. I want to give them credit where it's due. They did develop a really cool AI known as the R1. This is a language model that they used. And then, in developing it, it has very, very cool functionalities that make it very advanced. The question is, how many chips did they use to develop that? That's still to be determined. And the cost, I don't know for sure if it was truly under $6 million. They claim that. But I do want to say that when it comes to AI developments, there are going to be a lot of competitors for the US. That is something that we have to admit. So great work by their team. And then at the same time, this is leading to some fear and a lot of like panic selling that's happened to stocks like Nvidia over the legitimacy of their claims about the billions that need to be invested into AI and how dominant the US is going to be. However, despite that, one can argue that, especially with earnings season coming up, this move was exaggerated by the markets and that the market is due for a bounce because just, right before this data came out, the market was near all-time highs, and all of a sudden we just dumped super hard over this. We were due for a pullback, and one could argue that this was just an exaggerated move in the market's due for a bounce because of that. I would make that argument as well. Now, Nvidia of all things saw a big dump. It actually lost almost $600 billion in market value in just one day. That's one of the largest days we've seen, I would say, in many, many years. I think it's one of the largest one day losses we've seen on record. It's a very, very historical dump. Could you argue that this is exaggerated? You totally could. And we'll see if Nvidia bases very, very soon. For earnings, we had SoFi, AT&T, and a couple of them announced earnings for today. Tomorrow we have Boeing, GM, and a few more. And don't forget that for Wednesday we have Tesla, Meta, Microsoft, IBM, lots of big tech earnings by Thursday. So lots of big tech earnings start by Wednesday. Tomorrow it's going to be quite minor with just Boeing and GM. For SoFi, they had good earnings, but their guidance was a little bit lackluster. That's why the share price came down. So just keep that in mind. And last but not least, we have the Fear and Greed Index. This is currently at fear right now. There's still fear in the markets. We're going to be watching to see if the market gets a bounce. The put to call option ratio hit extreme greed. As soon as that happens, we see the market see this big this big sell-off, which ended up hurting a lot of people. And besides that, the market remained quite neutral. So what do I see from this point on? Well, I want to mention that when you look at the VIX, okay, when you look at the VIX, we have this big gap down here. If the VIX does not hold this 17 area, I think we could easily start filling this gap down. And that could be a sign that the market's going to try to bounce. Not a guarantee, but it's always a strong possibility. For stocks like NIO is obviously in the red right now. We're going to be watching to see if we could try to base right over here at this like 4.2 area. If we could hold this, we could try to see a rebound and continue to push for 4.5. And this could be forming a possible cup and handle. But if we end up losing 4.1, I'm looking for a bigger dump, and this could continue to fall into the low fours, and this could be invalidated. So I'm hoping that NIO holds 4.2 and tries to bounce and tries to get a big move to the upside. We'll see about that just to be safe. For other factors out there, I want to mention that we have SPY trying to rebound right here. If we could break this resistance by FOMC day, if we break past 602, this could start to fill this gap up here. We'll be watching to see if this is like a blow off top or not, if we make a lower high or not, and then we get another rejection to fill this gap below. I'll be watching to see, depending on FOMC, whether we pump and then get a big pump up or not. It depends on these different factors. If we can't hold 598, we're at risk of 593 again. As long as we're above that, we're favoring 602, which if we break, I'm looking for this gap fill for 608. So we are favoring, we want to bounce higher just for a temporary move. We'll see just to be safe, and that could also depend on other factors. The QQQ dumped really hard. We're going to be watching to see if we can try to get back above like 520. If we reclaim 520, I'm going to be looking for that gap fill attempts about 525 and then 528. So it could be trying to bounce here at least about 520. Hopefully we get that bounce, and we'll see what happens as time goes on. After a very exaggerated drop, I hope we do see some buyers return. The Russell is very flat right now, trading sideways. If we lose 225, we're looking for a dip back down to about 224. If we break 227, we're looking for that bounce. This is also in the middle, consolidating. It's going to be range bound for now, not really doing a whole lot. On ES, we're attempting to rebound. We have this big gap to fill. If we break 60.76, we're looking for that attempt to get to gap resistance at 6100, then to fill the gap at 6130. We'll see if that ends up being the case or not, so just keep that in mind. For NQ, if we end up losing 21,300, we're looking for a dip back down to about 21,100. If we hold this, we could try to break out for 21,500. If that breaks, we have this massive gap to fill at 21,862. So watch to see if we get that break or not, and be very, very patient. It's very important to remember that. So be very, very mindful nonetheless. For Bitcoin, we're trying to rebound right here. We're looking for essentially 102,673 is our resistance. If we break this, we're looking for 104,000. If we end up losing support right here to 101,000, we could be looking for a dip back down to 99,878. So watch to see if we get that bounce back up to resistance. For Nvidia, we dumped really, really hard all the way down to about this 117 area. We want to see if Nvidia could hold this support right here between 120 and 118. If this holds, we could be looking for a bounce tomorrow back up to about at least 126. I would like to see Nvidia bounce. This is a very exaggerated drop in my opinion, and there should be some buyers that try to defend it at least to some extent. Unless we get another catastrophic piece of news, I think there's a good chance we try to bounce a bit. So hopefully we get that. Tesla as well. I mean, we dumped really hard on Tesla. We have earnings in just a couple of days. I'm hoping that Tesla made this low here, grab liquidity, and tries to get a temporary move back up. Might try to push up to the 400 area if we break. Then I'm looking for this attempt to test this trend line. And we'll see if Tesla rejects off that or not, or if we break past the trend line to turn bullish after earnings. So we'll see if earnings drag this down or up. That's going to be a big factor. But I am expecting a move just like that. For Aapl, we pumped very well. We want to see if 230 breaks. If it does, this could help the market push for 234, and that could help the market bounce. Coin is trying to rebound here. I want to see if we could break 283 to push to 288. Amazon looks a bit more bullish. If we hold above 235, we're looking for 238 as our target. It dumped, made a full recovery, so Amazon's showing strength. Meta dumped and then made a full recovery as well. So very awesome stuff. You guys can see the effect that had on us. We're looking for an attempt to get back up to about the 670s. Microsoft, if we could break past 436, we're looking at an attempt to fill the gap to 443. Google's very weak here. We want to see it reclaim 197 to bounce. If it can't do that, it remains a little bit lackluster. So this is at risk of dipping lower towards like 191. As of right now, it's bearish unless you reclaim 197. So keep that in mind, guys. Google's a little bit lackluster. With that being said, guys, the market looks like it wants to rebound tomorrow, just temporarily approaching FOMC. We'll see if NIO gets a bounce, forming a cup and handle-like structure if it could hold these key levels. So give this the time it needs. With that being said, guys, I thank you all so much for listening. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll be back on the next one. Thank you, and peace out.